Hello dear participants, I welcome you all again in this certificate course on data interpretation using MS Excel and SPSS. In the previous lecture, we have seen some of the basic terminologies like universe, population, sample, population parameter and sample statistic. In this lecture, we are going to see two more terminologies and they are variable and data. But before that, let me put forward few questions. Here is question number 1. What is variable and what is data? The next question is what comes first, data or variable? Then what are the different variables that we use in research? Then the next question is what are the different types of the data? And finally, how data and variables are associated with each other. So in this lecture, we will try to answer all these questions. So here is the title of lecture 2 and the title is Introduction to Variable and Data. Objective of this lecture is to make you familiar with the meaning of the variable, to make you familiar with the different types of the variable, to make you familiar with the meaning of the data, and to make you familiar with the different types of the data. So let me start with the meaning of the variable. What is variable? Variable is a characteristic of an item or individual or an object. Suppose I am working on a particular research area, and if I go into the field with my questionnaire or interview schedule, and if I ask different questions to my respondents, like if I am asking for height, if I am asking for his weight or for eye color, marital status, income, or so on and so forth, all they are variables for me because they are representing the characteristics of my object. Fine, my respondent. So that's the meaning of variable. Now if I will go to the meaning of data, what is data? Data is the set of individual values associated with the variables. So that's the meaning of the data. And if I go to the meaning of statistics, what is the meaning of statistics? The method that help transform data into useful information for decision making. Now if you remember, in the previous lecture we have used one concept, one terminology, that is statistic, and this sample statistic is somewhat different than this statistics. Statistics is a method which help us to transform data into useful information, whereas sample statistic is the result out of some sample. So suppose here is a sample X and here are some numbers. This is the data that we have collected. Using this statistics, we will get some useful results, and those results are known as a sample statistic. So please don't get confused between these two terminologies. Statistics is somewhat different than the sample statistic, and this part already we have seen in the previous lecture. Statistics is simply the method by which we transfer data into useful information, and sample statistic, they are simply the result out of samples. So let me come back to the variable again. What is variable? Variable, they represent the characteristics of an item or an individual or an object. How we denote variable? We denote variable using different symbols, and they are mainly the capital letters from the English alphabet, X, Y, Z, or any other alphabet you can use, no issue. There are different types of the variables. If you will go to different books, you will find different names and different types of the variables with their own meanings. So we have tried here to summarize all those types, and here you can see the list of the different types of the variables like categorical variable, non-categorical, quantitative, qualitative, discrete, continuous. There are many. They are many. But here also in different books there are different names or different variables they are explaining, but there are some variables here in this list actually they are representing the same thing. What I mean to say, let's see, this categorical variable, this qualitative variable, this non-numeric variable and this non-metric variable, the names are different but they are representing the same thing, they are showing the same characteristic, they are showing the same variable, only the names are different. You go to different books you will find different names, but actually they all are same: categorical, qualitative, non-numeric and non-metric. How, that we'll see little later when we'll go and see the meaning of all these types. At the same time, on the opposite side, the meaning of non-categorical variable, quantitative variable, numeric variable and metric variable, though the names are different, but they represent the same thing, they represent the same characteristics. Fine. So, there are different ways that different books tells us about the different type of the variables. Here we have tried to enlist most of the variables and we are going to see the meaning of each and every type of the variable enlisted here. So let me go to further slide. So here is the first type, in which, as I earlier mentioned, that there are some types which are actually same, only the names are different, and here they are: categorical variable, qualitative variable and non-metric variable. They are same. What is the meaning of such type of the variable? They are the variable representing labels, names, categories, and they are referred as a qualitative variable. Fine. Suppose gender is one variable, then we'll be having only three responses. Either someone will say that he is male, someone will say that she is female, and someone will say that that person is a transgender. So there are only three categories in the gender. Story is same with the category. There are different categories defined by the government: general category, SC, ST, and there are some few. They are predetermined categories. So when there is a specific variable within which there are only labels or the names or the categories, then those variables will be known as a categorical or qualitative or non-metric variable. Now on the opposite side, if we come here, numerical or quantitative or metric variable, here in this case values that represent quantities are referred as a quantitative variable. And here are the examples: height, weight, income, distance, and so on and so forth. All they represents the numbers, or say that kind of quantities. We measure all these things using different numbers. So whenever the numbers are there, those things are known as the numerical or quantitative or metric variable. Hope you understood this. Now I'll go further. The other classification is discrete variable and continuous variable. This is also a very important classification of variable. Individual values fall on the scale only with a distinct gap is called discrete variable. Before seeing the properties, let me explain you the example. Suppose if I am asking to my respondent that how many kids are there in your family, number of kids in your family, then the respondent will say that one kid is there, one children is there, or two children is there, or three children is there. That is there anybody who will say that no, in my family I am having 2.5 kids? Is it possible? No, it is not possible. If I ask somebody that how many smartphones are there in your family, can someone say that in my family I am having 4.5 smartphone? No, it is not possible. Either he will say 4 or 3 or 2 or 1. So that is discrete variable. What is discrete variable? They are countable. We count it. See, counting is different and the measuring is different. We can count it, and there is nothing in between two things. Suppose there are two smartphones in one family, and in other family there are only three smartphones. There is nothing in between this. Either you will be having two smartphone or three smartphone or one smartphone or no smartphone. Fine. So such kind of variables are known as a discrete variable. What is continuous variable? Any numerical value within a specific range is called continuous variable. For example, here if I am asking for age, if I ask for age in years, and if my respondent says fine, my age is 20 years, that's fine. But if I ask age in years and months, then he can say I am 20 years and 10 months old. Fine. Again, I'll go further and I'll ask for the age in years, months and hours. Then he can respond me like 20 years, 10 months and suppose 10 hours. Furthermore, I can ask for in minutes, suppose 10 minutes. Further, I can ask in seconds and so on and so forth. So, always many things between two numbers. Always many things between two numbers, and we measure this. We can measure this. For example, if I wish to measure the length of my table, then you remember that in every house we are having tape, and using that tape, if I measure the length of the table, that we measure in the centimeter or millimeter, and again in the small part of that respective thing. So that's the continuous variable. That's the difference between discrete and continuous variable. Let me go to the further slide. What is dependent and independent variable? If the value of one variable depends on another, it is termed as a DV. DV is nothing but the dependent variable. I have just taken the initial these two things because this is a short form. So dependent variable means what? It depends on another. Independent variable is what? If the value of one variable is not dependent on other and it stands alone, is termed as an independent variable. For example, crop production, yes, it depends on rainfall. That is why when we are using these two variables, this one is the dependent variable and this one is the independent variable. Usually these variables, these type of the variables that we use in the regression analysis. Regression analysis is one of the statistical technique, and that is a very useful technique where we can construct the models. So in the regression we use this particular dependent variable and independent variable kind of concepts. See, deciding who is dependent and who is independent variable, it is actually big task and it needs better understanding of our research area. It is more associated with your understanding of your subject and your own logic. Fine. So mainly these two concepts are used in the regression analysis. Whenever we'll see the regression part in upcoming lectures, in that respective lecture, we'll again revise this part and we'll see that what exactly do we mean by the dependent variable and independent variable. Fine. Let me go to the further slide. Then here are some more concepts of the variable, types of the variable, like constant variable. If the variable assumes or represents only one value, then it is called a constant variable. Suppose in a regression analysis, we are going to compute like a plus bx. Here this a is known as a constant variable. Why and how and what's the meaning of this, that we'll see in that respective lecture. Here is the simple definition of constant variable. If the variable assumes or represents only one value, then it is called constant variable, and this term that actually we are using in the regression. Extraneous variable, again this is also associated with the regression. Regression is a one of the technique, statistical technique. Fine. So extraneous variable means what? if a variable that is not considered in the study but may affect the dependent variable is called extraneous variable. Then the next is random variable or the stochastic variable. So these two terms we use in the probability, or even we use in the regression analysis also. They are different statistical tools or the techniques. Whenever we'll go to the respective lectures, we'll again revise this part. Random variable means what? It is a variable whose value is subject to variation due to chance. What is dummy variable? Dummy variable is dichotomous variable used in regression to represent subgroups of the sample, and they are represented like 0 or 1, and they are mainly used in the regression model. The objective of this lecture is to just make you familiar with the different types of the variable. At least you should know the meaning of all these types of the variable. Fine. Now, if I go further, what is variable, what is an attribute, and what is value? This is also a very important thing. Attribute and value, in the meantime of this course, these things you will face, so that in this lecture we'll try to understand that what exactly do we mean by the attribute and what is the meaning of the value in the data and in so far the variable is concerned. So suppose if we choose one variable gender, and for this variable here are the attribute and here are the value or code. Gender is our variable. What is attribute? Attribute means the possible responses. Suppose we can either get the response like this or like this or like this. Can we get the response like if someone is saying I am male and I am transgender at a time? No. Either he is transgender or he is male or he is female. And here we call it mutually exclusive. Mutually exclusive things, right? So they are the attributes. And what is value? What is value? So for the variable is concerned, value is the number which we allot to the attributes. So for male we have used 0, female 1, and transgender. There is no thumb rule. You can use 3 for male, 0 for female, and 1 for transgender. No issue. It is not like that 3 is greater than this. This is not here. We are just allocating a particular number to that attribute, because your all softwares MS Excel or SPSS works with number, they don't work with the words. Fine. So that is the meaning of variable, attribute, and value. Now let me take you to the further slide, and here is the data. Now the variable is over. Now we have shifted to the data. What is data? Data, in a different word, data is nothing but the collected information. And what is the data? Means it contains of different variables. There are different variables in the data. What is raw data? Raw data, it is unorganized information. Once you suppose you visit the field and you collect the data and you just put it in the MS Excel, that is raw data. When you organize it the way you want for the statistical treatment, then it becomes the proper data on which we can give statistical treatment. On the raw data, it is quite difficult to give statistical treatment. Fine. So let me go further. What are the different types of the data? Just recall whatever the types of data that you are aware of. Just recall the different types of the data. Again, if you go to different books, there are different titles, there are different types of the data mentioned in the different groups. Here I have tried to summarize all those. They are primary and secondary data, qualitative and quantitative data, categorical, non-categorical, metric, non-metric, discrete, continuous, time series data, cross-section, pool data, etc. There are many. Now let me take you to the meaning of each of this. What is primary data? Primary data is a data which is collected afresh and for the first time. Primary and secondary data, I hope that you have heard all these types of the data like primary and secondary, so I will not spend more time on this. Secondary data, they are collected by someone and access is available easily. Then comes categorical data. Now here is the simple meaning. We have seen that during the types of the variables there is one type that is a categorical variable. Correct. Now what is categorical data? Data containing categorical variables. If there is a data which is having only categorical variables within, then it will reflect the categorical data. That is simple definition of the categorical data. Again, non-categorical data, data containing non-categorical variables reflects the non-categorical data. Then metric data, this is very interesting and very important also. Metric and non-metric data, if you are having the interval or the ratio scale data within, then that data is known as a metric data. Whereas in non-metric data, if we are having nominal or ordinal scale data within, then it will be known as a non-metric data. To understand this better, in a next lecture we are going to see the measurement of the scale. When we'll understand the measurement of the scale, then only you will understand what is metric data and non-metric data. For time being, you just consider it like metric data is actually non-categorical data, they are numeric data, and metric data is actually non-categorical data, and non-metric data is actually they are like categorical data or the qualitative data. Fine. So let me go to further slide. So again, more type of means the other type of the data is time series data. What is time series data? It is a set of observation on the values that a variable takes at a different time. For example, daily stock price. Suppose here is one chart. You can see here is the year. There are different years, right, mentioned here. And here is the personal consumption expenditure, one variable and denoted by Y. And here are the values. There are different years for a particular variable Y. Then this becomes time series data. This becomes time series data. I hope you understood this. Let me go to further slide. Cross section data. What is cross section data? It is a data on one or more variable collected at the same point in time. For example, here Y1 is the egg production in a particular year 1990. Fine. This is 1990 single year, and here are the different states of America, US. So there are different states. Fine. And for different states, how much is the egg production for a particular year, that is 1990. Now don't consider this data. Don't look at this part. Don't look at this part. Fine. If there is only one single time, and for that particular year or that for a particular time period, if you are collecting the production data from the different states, then that data becomes the cross section data. That data becomes the cross section data. It is a data on one or more variable collected at the same point of time. Fine. So that is cross section data. Now let me go to next slide. Pooled data. What is pooled data? Pooled data is a combination of time series data and cross section data. That is the combination of time series and cross section data. And here is the example. Here you can see that Y1 is the egg production for 1990 and Y2 is actually egg production for 1991. Two different years are there. So when there is more than 1 year, then it becomes time series. So here is the time series, here it is, and here are the different states in US. So when we combine cross section with time series, then it becomes pooled data. Then it becomes pooled data. All these three type of the data, actually they are more or less associated, or they are more actually involved in the subject econometrics. Econometrics is one of the advanced part of the statistics or the subject economics. Fine. So time series data, cross section data, and pool data, they are also the type of the data. Now let me take you to the further slides. So far we have seen that there are different types of the data. There are plenty types of the data. Fine. But what exactly we collect from all these different types of the data? What actually we collect from all these types of the data? Then the answer to this question is that we actually collect the variables. And what are variables? Variables are nothing but they are representing properties or the characteristics of our study object. Fine. They are actually all these data types collects only the variable. And what is variable? Variables are nothing but the properties of the study object. Then the question comes, how we measure the properties of the study object. So we need some scale to measure this property. How we measure the properties? We need some scale to measure these properties, and in research methodology or in statistics there are 4 scales of the measurement. They are nominal scale, ordinal scale, interval scale, and ratio scale. What is the meaning of all this, and what actually means what are the examples of these scales, that we'll see in next lecture, not in this lecture. Fine. So far this lecture is concerned, we have seen the meaning of variable and the meaning of data and the classification of the data. There are different ways that the data classification been presented, but for to make it more simple, we have summarized the classification of the data or the types of the data in this chart. This is a summary chart, we can say. Here data is classified into only 2 parts. One is a categorical, or call it non-numeric or non-metric. Other is a numeric, metric, and non-categorical. All other things like time series or cross section or pool and all, they comes under this. All they comes under this. Fine. So in brief, what I am saying, we classify data mainly into two things, or there are two different types of the data. One is a categorical, non-numeric, non-metric data, and other is a numerical or a metric or a non-categorical data. Numerical data is further classified into 2 parts. One is a discrete data and other is a continuous data. Discrete data where we count the numbers, and continuous data where we measure the numbers. Fine. So in a summary, this is the actually the classification of the data. There are different books and different ways that they present the classification of the types of the data, but to make it more precise, to make it more simple, and considering this course, we summarized here that this data is classified into 2 parts. There are 2 types of the data: categorical data and numeric data. And numeric data further been classified as a discrete data and continuous data. So far this lecture is concerned, I hope this is the slide, and here are the questions, the same questions we asked at the beginning of this lecture, and I hope that this lecture has answered all these questions. And the questions are: what is variable and what is data? We have seen. What comes first, data or variable? Definitely variable comes first, and data is actually made of the different variables. What are the different variables that we use in research? We have seen. What are the different types of the data? We have seen. and how data and variables are associated. That also we have touched upon. So here is the last slide of this lecture. In the next lecture, we'll go for the measurement of the scale. Thank you again for your kind listening and support. So see you soon in the next lecture. Thank you.